only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
The National Weather Service has issued a severe thunderstorm warning.
Welcome to the Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast, where prepping doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. Coming to you from a well-defended off-grid compound high in the mountains. Coming to you from his Florida room in Richmond, Virginia. Neither off-grid nor well-defended, unless you count his chickens and cats. Here is your host, Keith.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast. My name is Keith, episode 60. Today is December 29th, 2023. Before I forget, I want to talk about the corn index. Got an email a couple weeks ago, and this listener was curious about an update on the corn index. So for you folks who are not familiar with that, a couple years ago when I started purchasing and storing canned vegetables, I made note of the price at the time. Now, the corn that I purchased from Walmart at the time was 48 cents per can. I kind of wanted to track it as a non-official way to track inflation. Again, I'm not an economic advisor, but I thought it'd just be kind of fun to do because we all know that the price of everything has gone up, but 99% of the stuff I purchased, I don't really recall how much it cost a year or two ago. So the canned corn was 48 cents a can. It's now 62 cents per can, 14-cent increase per can. So if I had purchased 100 cans 2 years ago, it would have been $48. If I was to purchase 100 cans today, it would be $62. So a $14 increase over 2 years ago. To me, that's significant. And you can just extrapolate that. And I don't know what the price of milk was, 2 years ago, or cheese or anything. I just don't recall. But meat and chicken, and we know everything's gone up. So that was just kind of a fun little thing I wanted to try. So a 14-cent increase per can. Okay, I'm going to talk briefly about Israel and Hamas. You guys can keep up with that. There's all sorts of people that I'm following on Twitter or X or whatever that provide some really good information. And I encourage everybody, regardless of where you get your information, get it from multiple sources. So the ground war portion, I guess, of it has begun. Started a couple days ago with Israel going through the border fence, the barrier fence, and now making their way strategically through Gaza. Not exactly sure where they are, if they're on multiple points where they broke down the barrier and gone in. I don't have a lot of that information. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next couple weeks. Speaking of which, currently the United States has given Israel the green light to do what they need to do. I'm not really sure why they're asking us, but regardless, there are obviously a lot of countries that are very unhappy with Israel, and there are these protests that are going on all around the United States, all around the world, not just 30 or 40 people standing outside a synagogue or something like that, but hundreds of thousands of people are having these protests. Now, the protests are pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, or both of them globbed together, pro-Palestinian Hamas demonstration or protest. Well, regardless of what they're protesting for, we know what they're protesting against, and that is Israel. So they're anti-Israel, pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine protests. Now, some have turned violent. There's been clashes with police in Germany, in the UK, and in France. But most of them are people going through the street, yelling a bunch of stuff, waving a bunch of flags. But some of them have got out of hand. Yesterday, which will probably Saturday evening Russia time, they have 8 time zones. So whatever time zone this was in, several hundred Muslim males stormed a small airport, an operating airport, to protest the arrival of 2 flights from Israel. Now, as far as I know, the planes were not damaged. The passengers were not harmed. Several arrests were made. Russian military and local Russian law enforcement got access and told everybody to come out. They didn't. They went in and arrested a bunch of people. But that to me, that's pretty extreme, that you're going to break down the gate of an airport to protest the arrival of two planes from Israel that apparently have a bunch of Jewish people on it. But very, very bizarre and potentially dangerous. If any of those people would have had a weapon, it would have been and fired into those jets, there would have been immediate loss of life. A very, very, very odd type of protest. Several military bases almost a week ago were attacked by drones. Several soldiers were injured, some severely. None of them have passed away, thank goodness. And then we retaliated and dropped a bunch of bombs in Syria on some terrorist headquarters or training grounds or something like that. So in situations like this, it's kind of the response is relatively proportionate to the first strike. So they kind of do it tit for tat. You bomb my buildings, I'll bomb your buildings. You blow up some headquarters, I'll blow up two of your headquarters. So it's pretty much an equitable attack. But unfortunately, it's just going to be a matter of time until we actually lose some soldiers over there. And it'll be interesting to see what our response is. Do we then bomb a terrorist camp and kill 5 or 10 terrorists, or is it going to be something a little larger? The definition I heard the other day is called mission creep. CREEP, mission creep. And how it was defined is there's a conflict. So Israel and Hamas. The U.S. says, hey, we've got some warships in the Mediterranean. We're going to send them over this way and kind of hang off the coast and see if everything's okay. Then it's, well, we have another strike force. And then these folks are being diverted. And soldiers in Poland or Germany or some other country are now making their way closer to Israel. They're staged in several military bases we have in, I think it's Qatar, as well as military bases and Air Force bases that are in Italy, certainly within 4 or 5 hour flight to Tel Aviv. So they call it creep because little things are added here and there, more planes, more ships, more soldiers. And then before you know it, there's an announcement that the invasion of X, Y, and Z has just begun. And you're thinking, wasn't it just 3 or 4 weeks ago we were talking about a carrier strike force in the Med? And now we have several hundred soldiers, armored personnel carriers, whatever it happens to be, in a direct conflict or direct battle with some other terrorists. I think it's done for a reason. I think they kind of do it slowly like that because no one likes war. Well, except the industrial military complex here in the United States, and they love it. Anyway, if you do a little bit at a time, everybody has so much stuff going on. That you don't see the news story about of just a few more ships going in this direction, or 500 or 600 soldiers from Fort Bliss got on planes and they were heading over to the EU, to Germany, to wherever. And what they'll say is they're going there for some exercises or maneuvers that were already scheduled. And it just so happens a week after they arrive, they do their maneuvers and then they're shipped closer to Israel, or actually into Israel. So it'll be very interesting to see how much this creeps along. And then there's going to be something to set it off. And that's going to be a very unfortunate situation. I know I talked about this the last couple podcasts ago, that I honestly don't think there's a reason why we won't have a terrorist attack here in the United States. I don't see why it won't happen. We have the wide open border. And speaking of which, since the war between Israel and Hamas, there's very little coverage about the open border, yet people still continue to stream across the border every single day. We haven't talked a lot about the economy. Ukraine. I assume Russia and Ukraine are still fighting, and we're still sending bajillions of dollars over there. But isn't it kind of weird? The economy is doing terrible. People were really, really upset, and they're still upset about all the bajillions of dollars going to the Ukraine to help them fight Russia. And the border, everyone's all up in arms about all these tens of thousands of illegals a week coming across the border. So everybody was talking about that. And isn't it funny? All the attention from the media is now focused on Israel and Hamas. And rightfully so. I'm not saying it's a small news story, but when was the last time you heard or saw a story on the border? Ukraine and the economy. Now, we all know that the media here in the United States is on the far left. They're tied very closely to the government. The government, in a nutshell, let's be honest, the government will tell them what stories they want to run. The networks and the other news agencies will just parrot each other, and they'll use basically the same script. Sometimes the words aren't even changed at all. It makes sense to me on why they want to cover Israel and Hamas, because they're probably, thank goodness, we're tired of covering the crazy economy, the war in Ukraine with Russia, and then the wide open border. It gives them a reason to literally not cover that and cover Israel and Hamas. Speaking of which, the media here in the United States, they won't go to Israel and do a lot of coverage on their soldiers, their tanks, their weapons, that sort of thing. They go over to Gaza, where some civilians have been injured by rocket fire, whatever it happens to be. And that's what's going to play over and over and over about how innocent civilians are being injured or killed during this war. And I think that's done on purpose to put pressure on the Israelis, the Israeli government, to somehow come to the table, have a ceasefire, a truce, whatever you want to call it. And that's going to keep pounding away in the media. Would it be the world or the court of world opinion, I guess? So there'll be a lot of pressure put on Israel to ceasefire, draw back into Israel, whatever it happens to be. I just really think that's going to happen. So I talked about putting together a get home bag as opposed to my little EDC bag I have in the Jeep. So I've checked out a lot of videos on YouTube, and this particular gentleman, the title of his YouTube channel is Ranger Survival and Fieldcraft. He has a lot of videos. He breaks down all the different types of, everyday carry, survival kits, small ones, just minimal, up to very large kits. And he has some really good information. So if you get a chance, go to YouTube and look up Ranger Survival and Fieldcraft. He has a lot of good videos, a lot of good information. So what I did, I initially went to my gear closet where all my camping gear is, and I started going through that. I have a hammock, a knife, a small cook pot, and I'm thinking about, if it's a go-home bag and I'm going to be within 2 or 3 days of walking distance back to my house, I may just pack it with MREs and not have to carry the little, it's like a jet boil. It's got the canister and the little holder and all that. I think maybe MREs, although they're going to be bigger, they're more, I guess they're just more practical, and you don't have to worry about them going bad or anything like that. For water purification, I have a Sawyer Mini Squeeze, a Life Straw. I got several of those. They were on sale at Costco. Rain gear, I'm good. First aid kit, I'm good. Fire kit, I'm good. Cordage, carabiners, gates. I got locking gates, non-locking gates, some really heavy-duty carabiners and D-rings, and I have some really lightweight plastic ones that they're not made for climbing at all, but they're very lightweight, and you can clip things onto those and hang them off your backpack. I guess what I need now is like a bag. I need to find the right size bag. And the thing about backpacking is, and probably when you travel, is if you get a big bag, you want to fill the bag up. You're like, well, I have this big bag, I must fill it up. And that kind of defeats the purpose. So I want to get my kit together first, and then I want to look for a bag to fit my kit, as opposed to, here's a bag and I need to build a kit big enough for it to go into my new bag. But I'll finish that up probably this week, maybe next week. And then there are some things I'm going to have to purchase, but most of it I already have in my backpack. So that was cool. That saved me a lot of money. Plus, I don't go hiking as much as I used to, and I can certainly repurpose it. All right, I want to talk a little bit about where you folks are and all the different countries that tune into the podcast. And again, I appreciate every single one of y'all. United States, 85% of the listeners are here in the United States. We have Canada, the UK, Australia, South Africa, Germany, Estonia, Denmark, Portugal, Malaysia, Pakistan, Finland, Taiwan, France, and Sweden. The folks in Sweden, I don't know if it's the same people, but Sweden and Finland, one of the first couple foreign countries that actually downloaded the podcast and listened in, and they've been here all along. I go and check the metrics every once in a while. And again, folks, I really appreciate you guys stopping by, because every podcast I do, it gets a little more traction, more views, more downloads, and I really appreciate you all stopping by and listening to me babble for a while. All right, folks, if you want to get a hold of me, I'm on the Twitter or the X Twitter, Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast, or prep_podcast is the handle or the official name. Email, it's a Gmail, practicalpreppodcast@gmail.com. Feel free to send me an email. I really appreciate all the emails that I do get. Okay, folks, thanks again for stopping by. With all of the shenanigans going on, it is a crazy, crazy world. I don't think there's going to be World War III. I don't have a thing to wear. What do you wear to World War IIIs anyway? I have no idea. I certainly hope it does not come to that. I honestly don't. Okay, folks, as always, please be careful out there. Take care of one another. And until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. While you're at it, help spread the word by leaving a rating and review.